Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban, and getting rid of dangerous artifacts is so much easier in the 24th century than it was in Indiana Jones's day. The entire universe is your shady warehouse. I'm joined on this episode once again by GooeyFame. Gooey is a musician and a podcaster, the co-host of the Virtual Theater podcast and the Pro Wrestling Required Viewing podcast, and my co-host on the Backtrekking podcast. Gooey, welcome back to the show.
Hey, permission to come aboard?
Permission to come aboard is granted.
Yes.
Today
never fails.
We can never get rid of you. Today we'll be talking about The Sword of Kahless, the 9th episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Power tends to corrupt, wrote Lord Acton when he was arguing that political and religious leaders should be judged for their criminal behavior by the same standards as the people they rule. However, a review of the history of civilization that extends even to the year 2020 would reveal that the power of office persistently obviates the responsibility of leaders to their misdeeds. It's just something the human race seems to be saddled with. And the human race, if the history of Star Trek is to be believed, is not alone in that affliction. The history of the Klingon Empire is one of great passion and turmoil, of great devotion to the Klingon tenets of honor and heroism, and the scheming opportunism of filthy patachs. To paraphrase Michel de Montaigne, every Klingon has within himself the entire human condition, and even honorable warriors can be tempted by the promise of glory. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Gooey, it's great to have you back on the program.
Yes, thank you.
What is new in your world?
What is new? I don't know. I've just been watching Picard. Been enjoying that lately, I guess. I haven't seen the new episode. A little bit behind, but yeah, I don't know. Just been hanging out watching Star Trek.
I know that they, of course, they did Klingons pretty heavily in Discovery, so it might be a little while before we see any Klingons on Picard, if we ever do. But I feel like Picard, and we'll talk about this, of course, as we go on today, but Picard is so closely tied to the history and the politics of the Klingon Empire in the 24th century that it would be crazy to not have that show up somehow. They mentioned it in the last episode of Picard. They mentioned that he was the Chadich, for the Klingon rite of ascension or whatever it is. But yeah, it's Romulans now, but we got to do Klingons later.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I like the approach of I think we've talked about before in various podcasts about how the Romulans that, when they brought them back, it was to various degrees of success sometimes.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're maybe given another go at it, and they're doing some interesting stuff with the Romulans. So
yeah, I hope so. And we'll talk about that a little later. I don't want to get too deep into that right now.
Sure.
Something that we often do on our show, Backtrekking, before we compare a Star Trek episode with some form of popular media that inspired it, is to take a look at the latest Trek-related news. And I thought we could check out a few recent Trek stories.
Oh, yes.
Just today, I believe, when we're recording this, it was announced that Viacom CBS is preparing to launch a new streaming service that will combine both the Viacom streaming service and CBS All Access into one giant overlord service. Yeah.
I didn't even know about the Viacom streaming service, actually.
Didn't either, but I just assumed that I have a streaming service, don't you?
Yeah. Who doesn't these days?
Everybody does, yeah.
I think it comes with your internet or, phone bill every month. You can opt in.
I used to have that. My phone company, before we got into all this like Netflix and streaming on computers and devices and video game consoles, they offered, you can get free streaming of videos. That was supposed to be like a value add to their program. But I think they got rid of that because there are so many. That's all you would do on your phone. That's all some people do on their phones now is just watch streaming content.
Yeah, it's like you got to sweeten it a little bit now.
There's so this will combine the CBS All Access, Paramount Pictures movies, and pretty much all content that falls under the Viacom CBS banner, which is a lot. And this is, of course, in the wake of the Viacom CBS merger that happened recently and will be finishing up, I believe, at the end of this year or at the end of last year. And it leaves, I think, in doubt the persistence of CBS and Viacom content on current streaming platforms. You can see a lot of Star Trek on Netflix. I used to be able to see Star Trek on Amazon Prime. I think they still have the animated series there. But who knows? It seems likely that they will all just be on CBS All Access in the future.
Yeah, I remember it wasn't the animated series leaving Netflix. That was like the first domino.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
The first poorly animated domino to fall.
Well, I guess they got to do something because, I mean, it's great watching it for Picard, but I feel like they're trying to sweeten the pot a little bit more because it's not that exciting to have CBS All Access. I don't think otherwise, but
somebody gets their young Sheldon fix from CBS All Access.
Oh, every time I see that face, I'm just like, please get this off the screen.
I can't punch a child. Yeah.
No.
So we'll see, and of course we'll report on this show if there's any change there. But that's definitely going to that'll be another shot fired in the streaming wars, which seem to be ongoing.
It's kind of it is a little unfortunate because I know Star Trek had somewhat of a resurgence, at least with like people I knew anecdotally, like because of Netflix, you know.
Yeah.
And going out of your way is not as enticing, you know.
Yeah, and people complain about having to, watch ads if you've got like the regular and not the premium subscription or whatever. But CBS All Access is still less than Netflix. Monthly. And so I think if they play their cards right and they're smart, they won't jack the price up once this merger, finishes, or they won't jack it up too far. Because I think once you have all these Paramount Pictures, you've got all these CBS shows, new and old. I mean, I still think it's a pretty good value. And I don't get paid to say that. And I don't want to pay 15 different streaming fees. But there's a lot of things on there. Like I already do it now. So if everything moves to CBS, as long as it's still in HD and still looks good, I don't really have a problem with it.
Yeah, and I think the movies, Paramount Pictures will be nice too.
Yeah, I think so. Some of those, we might talk about some of those movies today. The Indiana Jones movies are all Paramount Pictures movies, of course.
Yeah, that's a good deal. I think some people, if you go, I want to watch Indiana Jones, like, who doesn't want to at some point, Or
Transformers. Somebody's getting their Transformers fix from CBS All Access.
I would watch it if I have CBS All Access. Maybe one night I'll just throw on Transformers.
Yeah. I have talked about this before. I don't know if I've talked about it on Backtracking. I think I've talked about it on this show, but I planted my flag earlier on, and I said, let's do it. You want to turn Star Trek into a commodity. You want the STU. Bring it on. Let's whore this thing out and see what we get. And we're getting it now, and I don't know how I feel.
Okay, but not much has really changed yet, right?
Well, except for 8 million shows that are all going to come out.
Damn.
And Star Trek jewelry and Star Trek perfume that I saw ads for the other day.
Oh, boy. Well, I feel like for me it's still... I'm like, right in the middle of, whether I think it's good or not. But I feel like I got to see the shows before it happens. I mean, I've liked Picard so far, so I feel like... I feel like they're capable of doing something all right.
Yeah, bring back the Spock helmet, cowards. That's what I have to say. The funny thing, too, is that a lot of these shows are kind of mini-series. Like, Picard is a show, but it's 10 episodes, 45 minutes apiece, or 44 minutes apiece. It's like a mini-series. It's just like a long movie. And I wonder if even Discovery was like 13 episodes, or they went to like 15 or 16 episodes. So I wonder if we'll ever get a traditional more than 20 episode series of a show, or if this is just the way it is now.
Yeah, I don't think that really happens as much in television. It doesn't seem.
Young Sheldon.
Yeah, Young Sheldon. There's that. Unless you're a sitcom, I suppose. So.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that Picard's at least kept the episodes to 45 minutes.
Yeah, they've all been pretty tight. They've all been about the same length. And we did discuss on Discoverage, our show where we talk about CBS All Access shows when you're a guest, about how this it really does feel like it's just one long pilot, like these first 3 episodes of Picard. And I remember in the advance news about the show, we heard that there'd be 10 episodes and that they would be directed in pairs. So the first 2 episodes would be directed by somebody, in this case, Hanel Culpepper. The next 2 would be directed by Jonathan Frakes, and so on and so forth. And there ended up being 3 episodes of this first sort of block that were all directed by Culpepper.
Oh, okay. Does it keep that pattern up, or is it still? Then it's
Well,
like
I know
2-2?
the next one is Frakes, and the next one after that is Frakes. We don't know the title of that one, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just wondering if they were making the pilot and they thought, oh, this is okay. No, we got to have more stuff in here. So,
okay.
What if we
expand it?
Yeah, or maybe they were like 2 60-minute episodes, 2 really long episodes, and they thought, I think it fits better if we go 1, 2, 3 and split them up different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I've been, for the most part, enjoying Picard so far. I think that there's been, now that the show's kind of rolling and we know where we are for the most part, I hope to see it sort of pick up a little more. There's a couple parts that were like real, I don't want to say this, real TV righty. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we've got to set this up exactly. We have to have, like, a great example is there's this evilish character, Lieutenant Rizzo, who appears in all 3 of the first 3 episodes, and all of her scenes are just, are we doing the bad thing? You better get on that bad thing. Oh, I love this bad thing. It's just, they just cut back to the evil guys. And they're like, oh, when they find out what this thing is. Yeah, it doesn't really like develop their characters. It doesn't push any decisions, to push the plot forward or anything like that.
I kind of enjoyed in the second episode. I liked their schemes. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it just felt like way more. It felt like a throwback. It felt kind of simple. Like, yeah, the bad guys are up to some stuff, and I don't know. I just found it a little charming in a weird way.
It reminds me of when they were planning the big reveal when Denise Crosby came back to TNG as Sayla.
Yes, yeah, that's a great example.
And we're talking about Klingon episodes today, so it totally applies. Like Duras or the Duras sisters would go and be jerking around doing something, and the last 2 minutes of the episode would be a silhouette of a Klingon or a Romulan with a bob haircut, and it'd be like, oh, we'll get him next time.
There was something that did feel very. I mean, it didn't remind me of the best aspects of Star Trek, but it did just like feel very Trek-like to me, and it was it's cool to watch a new show that's doing some Trek stuff. So
I want to see that Trek stuff. Yeah,
give me that Trek stuff.
Hand it over. Well, why did you choose this specific episode, The Sword of Kahless, to discuss today?
Well, you mentioned how I won't let the Worf thing go.
He's a Worf stan.
Yeah, I think we had talked about, because I had suggested the idea of doing a Worf show or movie, and I think I had made a comment where I said it would make up for the fact that they never did a Deep Space Nine movie.
Ah, okay.
And you could incorporate his, story from there. And you had made the comment that Worf's story in Deep Space Nine is a little bit more of like an encore or something. I can't remember your exact wording, but it was like it was just kind of like continuing some elements from TNG, and it's not as iconic as TNG, let's say.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to test that a little bit, I just watched all his episodes on TNG a couple months ago, and I just wanted to continue that and see, how his story kept going, because I've seen these, but it's been a while, so it was sort of a review for Worf, if you will.
Well, I'd be happy if you were our Worf correspondent on the show.
I'd be happy to be.
To clarify, I don't remember making those statements, but it sounds like me. To clarify those statements, I think it's more that, the way that I talked earlier about Picard's pilot, the first 3 episodes being like the first chapter and let's get to the story. I feel like Worf's time on TNG was like the first 2 acts of a great story. Then he's added to DS9. He farts around for like 3 seasons. And then, of course, he gets married. That's important. And then we have a great coda to his whole story, really. Like the fact that he he feels like an outsider. Sometimes he is legally an outsider from the Klingon Empire. And he is a man he really believes all this crap Klingons talk about all the time.
Yeah.
When many of the people that he is helping, serving, and working with do not at all, or just pretend to. Like, he is the righteous man in this situation. And seeing him have to make the decisions that he makes near the end of DS9 and be really thrust into this position that he earned and is good in a lot of ways, but it was tough to get there. Like, yeah, that's like DS9 is like the great third act of the Worf story.
Okay. I can see how that is. But there's a couple seasons in there where he's just kind of like, it's kind of like doing the same thing until you get to that moment, maybe.
Yeah, and he's like living on the Defiant, and it's like, is that just to keep him like off the station so we don't have to do much with him? He's just kind of hanging around for a lot of the later parts of DS9.
I like it though. I like seeing Worf, and I like his relationship in this series with Jadzia. So it's cool. It's cool to see him.
Yeah, and I was really fascinated by this episode. It reminded me of the fact that Trek, even at this point, has such a deep stable of characters to pull from. I mean, Terry Farrell's and Michael Dorn, their names are above the title, but I don't think they're really like the main characters of DS9. We get in some of the other spacefaring shows. But yet, you can take both of them. You can take a character who literally was on the original series way, way back in the day,
yeah, and
just throw them in some caves and have a fun episode. Like, Trek has a lot of strength in that. And I know, like, we go back to CBS All Access Trek, I want new characters. I want to see new things going forward. But for Picard especially, we're not too far from the TNG era. Like, you could bring some of those characters back. We could have some of those characters fit in. I'd like to see them take, here you go, here's a pitch. What's the outrageous Okana up to?
Yes.
Like, Bill Campbell's out there still. Yeah, what if this character shows up and you're like, wait a minute, who is this? Is that Okana? And now he's like wrapped up in something else. Like, they could do that with any of the myriad kind of fun characters they had. Like we mentioned before, like Mudd, for instance, back in the old Berman Trek days.
Yeah, I'm just like frothing for Bruce Maddox to show up.
Yeah.
It's also too, because I feel like a lot of these, character actors who play some of these characters for one episode, aren't quite as like fondly remembered as, the big movie stars of their era. And I always like when they kind of let them do another, a victory lap, for their great character they portrayed, but in a more updated, modern setting. That's why I'm excited to see, like, Hugh, and be like, here's Hugh in high definition, good for him. He deserves that, Same thing with all the old Klingon actors who got to come back on Deep Space Nine. It was like, hell yeah, like, these guys like deserve that in a way.
Yeah.
Although Lifetime Achievement Award.
You're right. You get a statue. Yeah. Although I'm sure Hugh's thrilled that, like, great, now we've got HD, and I've got wrinkles now, and I don't have white pancake makeup to cover them up. But whatever, it's a chance to play a cool character. I hope that we see all that stuff, and I would even take a peek at your Old Man Worf series if that ever comes.
Yes, please.
What's he up to in the future? Well, we're talking the DS9 episode, The Sword of Kahless. It is the 9th episode of the 4th season. It first came out on November 20th of 1995. The teleplay for the episode is by Hans Beimler, who we've talked about before on the show. He was a writer and producer on both TNG and DS9. And along with Ira Stephen Bear, was one of the chief architects of the Dominion War storyline on DS9. The story of the episode is by Richard Dennis. Richard Dennis was an executive story editor and a staff writer for TNG. He wrote the teleplay for the Booby Trap episode of TNG and was the writer of Deja Q on TNG. He also wrote, along with Sword of Kahless, the episode Battle Lines for DS9. That was a really weird one where they went to that planet in the Delta Quadrant with Kai Opaka for some reason, and then they crashed, and like, she died, but because of like the nanites on the planet, like, she was alive again, but she couldn't leave the planet.
That's got Mike from Breaking Bad.
Right, yeah. And they're all having like this cyberpunk war or something. Yeah, it's just really weird.
I have fun with that one.
Yeah, it's fun. Dennis was also an executive story consultant on the Serpico TV series way back in the late 70s, and he wrote and directed the 1992 film No Place to Hide, starring Chris Christopherson. This episode was directed by some guy named LeVar Burton. Burton directed 29 episodes in total. I didn't recognize him without the visor. He directed 29 episodes in total among the 4 Berman Trek series. And, of course, he originated the role of Geordi LaForge alongside Michael Dorn in Star Trek The Next Generation. Yeah, that's who it is. And the start date for the episode is unknown, which is pretty typical of later DS9 episodes. They just kind of do what they do. But it takes place in the Julian calendar year 2372. Your assignment, Gooey, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of the Sword of Kahless.
Ooh, okay. Worf, Jadzia, and one of the old Klingons. I always confuse them.
They're all Ks.
Go on a journey to recover the lost Sword of Kahless, but they just can't seem to get along.
Why can't these guys get along? I love that you've got, Kor, Koloth, and Kang. Why isn't Worf's name Korf?
Yeah.
If they're all Ks.
Yeah, that was the naming convention that I guess they ran out of them or something.
And Kahless, of course, and of course the bad guy is Molor, and Worf's dad is Moch. So maybe the bad guy's names start with M, and the good guys start with K. What's that with Worf?
I was going to say maybe this is like a Mario Wario situation, but that doesn't quite work.
Lieutenant Waluigi, yeah.
Warfio.
Well, here's some interesting facts from the memory banks about this episode. This episode represents, to date, the last episode in the Worf versus Duras arc, which began with the TNG episode Sins of the Father, and presumably, you'd think, ended with the deaths of Lursa and B'Etor in Star Trek Generations, but nope, here comes Toral, son of Duras.
Yeah, maybe that gives sort of credence to, or like maybe the idea that like that element of that thread of that storyline is sort of just like it is kind of just like a period on the end of it. It's not necessarily earth shattering, but it is just like some, here's some lingering stuff happening still.
Right. And this is early. This is in the 4th season. So let's say that Toral, he doesn't get Worf excommunicated again, but let's say that, the Dominion War comes up and he goes on to heroism in the Dominion War. He becomes a popular figure and he rises within the ranks and he's got the chancellorship within his reach. And with that power, he's able to push Worf out, make him kind of unpopular in the Klingon High Command. Now we've got our old man Worf set up.
Oh, okay. So even there, they've got some seeds there. I like that.
Yeah. Well, there's always seeds in Star Trek. Yeah, Star Trek is like a flower shop.
I love that they could just pull to this in this episode, and just have. It's a nice way to like kind of kick off Worf on Deep Space Nine, other than his, inaugural episode.
Right. Make it happen. Come on. The Spock helmet and Old Man Worf.
Spock helmet. Hashtag Spock helmet.
The titular tricked-out Sword of Kahless seen in the episode was initially sketched by concept illustrator John Eves. Eves has worked as an illustrator and designer for DS9, as well as Star Trek Enterprise, Discovery, and Picard, and 8 of the Star Trek films as well, and he's created many of the ship designs seen in the films and on TV. But for this very special Batleth, he handed the job over to Dan Curry, who is a visual effects supervisor on TNG. He's also a visual effects supervisor for DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, and was the creator of the original Batleth design. Of course, in the universe of Star Trek, the Sword of Kahless was designed by Kahless the Unforgettable himself, created by dropping a lock of his hair into a river of lava from Kristok's summit, and then cooling the burning lock in the Lake of Luxor. In order to give the sword an ancient and Baroque look, the prop department cast a brand new Batleth prop out of aluminum. They gave it leather handles to give it sort of a more archaic look, and they etched like a Damascus steel-like pattern into the sword. It's got that kind of texture to it, and they wrote characters in the Klingon language on the body of the sword as well.
They went the extra mile for this sword.
Yeah, and it looks like a Batleth on steroids, kind of.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
A Batleth similar to the Sword of Kahless, which was probably the prop for this episode, is given to B'Elanna Torres by Captain Kolar in the Voyager episode Prophecy.
Oh, nice.
And we see Sisko touching up his goatee at the start of the episode with a blue crystal razor thing. Now, I have no idea how that works or why it actually makes a razor noise, if it's like a future thing. But we've seen that prop before when it was used by Geordi to shave his beard in the TNG episode Code of Honor.
Ooh, okay. Would you shave with this thing? Seems kind of cool.
Does it have a setting that gives you like cool stubble that's like in right now?
Oh yeah, give me that.
I wouldn't want to go
perfect
totally
shadow.
clean. Yeah, just that like 1 day of growth. The prop was created by Trek senior production designer Rick Sternbach, who also designed the pad, the actual station of DS9, and the USS Voyager. Let's talk about the guest stars in this episode. Of course, this episode stars Worf, played by Michael Dorn. Worf was added to the cast of DS9 at the start of the 4th season, and this episode was conceived specifically to showcase Worf as a character. Dorn played Worf for 7 seasons of TNG, 4 TNG movies, as well as 4 seasons of DS9, an episode of Family Guy, and an episode of Webster. He also played
the Webster. Oh my god.
Web Trek. He also played Colonel Worf, the grandfather of Worf, son of Moog, in Star Trek VI. And Dorn has directed 3 DS9 episodes and 1 Enterprise episode. His first film role was in Rocky, where he appeared uncredited as one of Rocky's bodyguards. He went on to a... Yeah, I don't even remember that, but I'm sure he's a big guy. I can believe that. He went on to a regular role in the TV series Chips, and he's put his sonorous voice to work as a voiceover artist, both in advertising and in cartoons. Many will remember his work on Gargoyles, as well as the Neutrogena T-Gel commercials. He's also an accomplished pilot. This is really interesting. He's a pilot, having flown with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. And after being diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2010, he became a vegan.
Oh, sweet. Shout out.
Are you vegan?
I'm vegetarian now. I was vegan for a long time, actually.
No, like meat or anything like that, but anything else is A-okay.
I eat vegan pretty often, but every once in a while, I will still have a couple of things of dairy, but I still I have like almond milk and stuff like that pretty on the regular.
We'll have to have you back for an episode about veganism in Star Trek, because you get the idea that Riker says at one point that, like, we don't eat, like, animals anymore. And I don't know if that means, like, just Riker's a vegan, or the replicated burned bird meat that they make from the replicator. Like, they don't consider that... They consider that veganism because that was never, like, alive. Like, what does he mean exactly? Yeah.
But then every once in a while, they're like, I got these special from, I got these caviar or whatever from someplace, or this
right.
real egg. I can't fault them.
And I don't think eating the heart of your enemy counts against your veganism.
No, absolutely not.
You gotta do. There's no tofu hearts in Klingon culture.
Klingons gotta do what they gotta do. I understand that.
Yeah. Kahless looks the other way when you do that. John Colicos appears as Dahar Master Kor in this episode. Colicos first appeared as Kor in the original series episode Errand of Mercy, which was also the first appearance of the Klingons. He would reprise Kor for 3 episodes of DS9, Blood Oath, and Once More Unto the Breach, as well as this episode. Colicos was born in Canada, and he got his start on the stage, appearing in New York theater and on stage at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, where he played the title role in Stratford's first production of King Lear. Colicos was a familiar face on TV in the 60s and 70s, often playing villains and often in sci-fi series. Aside from Kor, he also played the role of Count Baltar in the original Battlestar Galactica film and series. He appeared many times on other Desilu series as well, like Mission Impossible and Mannix, and he was the last person to be shot and killed on the TV series Gunsmoke in the last episode of its 20-year run. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not familiar with him outside of Star Trek, but I love him.
So I'm guessing that means that you haven't seen the 1973 Canadian TV show, The Star Lost.
I've never heard of that, no.
This is Star Lost Corner. Whenever I get a chance to bring up Star Lost, I have to.
I'm already excited.
Star Lost is a TV show that was designed and conceived of by Harlan Ellison, but you never know because, like many things that Harlan Ellison has worked on, he got real mad and he stomped off and he made them put his pseudonym Cordwainer Bird on it, and when you see that, you know that's he's flipping the bird. Like he doesn't. I disown this.
What a grouch! Come on, man.
He was, but he had good qualities too. The Star Lost is about a generation ship which was launched from Earth a long time ago, and there's different environments on it, and we center on this environment that is like an Amish farm. These people think that they just live like on an Amish farm, basically, in the middle of nowhere. And Sterling Hayden is actually in charge of this thing. And this one guy, played by Keir Dullea from 2001, he knows that there's something else out there. And so he finds a way out of the farm. And of course, he's on this amazing ship that he doesn't understand. And so every week he's going from habitat to habitat. And it's a perfect like setup for a sci-fi show because they're all like, this is the goofy one where we play games. And this is the one where it's all medieval England and stuff like that.
Wow, where can I watch this?
You can't. It might be on like a Region 3 DVD or something like that. But yeah.
All right. This sounds sweet. I'm gonna have to track this down.
I can't remember where I got it from, but I'll try to hook you up.
There we go. Okay.
Colicos was also the voice of Apocalypse on the 90s X-Men cartoon series, and he had an educational...
Oh.
Yeah.
I am familiar with his work.
There you are. You do know his work. And he had an educational program on Canadian TV called Prophecy with John Colicos.
Oh, okay.
And he passed away in the year 2000 at the age of 71.
R.I.P. Well, yeah, he had a great career, it sounds like.
Yeah, and he is so good at this. Do you know what I mean? He's just like,
yeah.
He's so... I mean, you could really nail Klingon actors. You see Klingon actors that are just like, I'm a Klingon, I'm just doing my job or whatever. I'm saying the lines. But then there's guys that just get it, like Robert O'Reilly. You know,
yeah.
The guy that plays Martok, who's John Hertzler. And like Colicos just understands. Colicos had a personal philosophy about acting, which was, when all else fails, be enigmatic.
Okay, yeah. He definitely lives by that in this role.
Yeah, for sure. Rick Pasqualone appears as Toral, son of Duras. That role was previously played by actor J.D. Cullum in the TNG two-parter Redemption 1 and 2. This is one of Pasqualone's first acting roles. He would go on to guest star on shows like Friends and NYPD Blue, and he also lends his voice to a lot of video games.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with him, really, but he was all right. He was all right in this.
Me either. I wonder how the video game sort of voice acting community works, because there's certain people who get the job and you just know, oh, I know that voice, I know who that is, and I wonder if like they like your Troy Bakers or your Nolan Norths, for example.
Yeah, they're just in every game.
Yeah, like do they get like the right of first refusal on like some of the roles?
Yeah, it seems like a weird world, because I guess like even someone like this guy is probably in a ton of these same games, but I mean, I guess if your job is to be like random NPC number 5, then I don't even know. I don't know who he's played, so I'm making assumptions. But maybe the fact that we don't notice him, he's done his job.
Yeah, for sure. It's always funny when you hear somebody who's really familiar, and maybe they've got like they've been in a lot of like cartoons, but they're not high up on the video game totem. So Nolan North or Troy Baker's the main guy, but then some other guy walks up and it's like,
and it's Bender.
Is that so-and-so? Yeah, right. Bender or Steve Bloom, who's the voice of, I think, Wolverine in cartoons, and also other like anime dubs. Often gets like these sort of, some guard will come up and he's like, hey, what's going on? It's like, whoa, Wolverine.
Yeah, it's like, or you go to the shopkeeper, and it's Mark Hamill for some reason.
Yeah.
What is he doing?
And Tom Borga appears as Soto, the vampire-looking alien in the episode. Borga is a stunt actor and a coordinator who holds the record for the most appearances as a stunt actor in Trek. He got his start on Star Trek the motion picture in 1979, and he went all the way to the end of Enterprise in 2005. So 26 years. That's a nice career.
Yeah, that's sweet.
He's appeared in every series and has screen doubled for many of the series leads. And if you go to his Memory Alpha page, it's just an endless grid of pictures of all the characters that he's played or the stunts that he's done.
Wow, okay. I've never heard of this guy, but I gotta respect that.
He's doing his job.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's get into talking about the episode itself. If this were an episode of Backtrekking, I think that we'd be comparing this episode to an Indiana Jones film, maybe all of them. Specifically, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. LeVar Burton actually described the Sword of Kahless as the Holy Grail.
Okay.
It also has a lot of connections, I think, to the 1948 film The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Oh, I've never actually seen that.
Oh, it's a great film.
Yeah. I mean, I of course know it, but yeah. Wow.
And in that, some treasure hunters are basically, looking for this treasure, similar to our characters here, and the lust for wealth that sort of boils in between them leads to they kind of turn on each other.
Okay, yeah, that element of this episode felt, it's like, oh, I recognize this from other things, but I mean, it was still pretty effective in this, even though it was kind of not new or surprising of a trope, I guess. But I liked it.
Yeah, something that I thought was interesting was, as I was reading up on this, and I guess I'm kind of guilty of this too, but fans initially didn't like this episode, apparently because they didn't understand what was going on with the sword. And ultimately...
yeah, I can see that, actually.
Yeah. Ultimately, if you... Iris Stephen Bear was being interviewed about it, and he said that, like, if you think about it, and the way that it's connected to something like Sierra Madre, or even Last Crusade, there isn't any power in the sword. It's bringing out, like, the worst in these characters. And I have to say, like, I've seen this a couple times, and just about every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, is the sword is corrupting. It's like the ring, it's like Sauron's ring or something like that. And no, apparently that's not what it is.
Yeah, I always have that thought about it. It seems like almost from what I thought was like too late, where I'm like, wait, has this been corrupting them the whole time? And then it doesn't come up. So I get it. I guess you could be kind of confused by that, but I kind of like that they kind of stick with their guns with it,
Yeah, I totally buy that. But at the same time, there's, as I was thinking that, watching the episode, I'm like, oh, this opens so many doors. Like, if this was the weapon created by Kahless, and like the one that he used to slay his enemies and form the Klingon Empire, is the entire Klingon way of life based on this lust for blood that the sword creates in you? Is this a +3 batleth of bloodlust? Is their entire like traditions, is it all based on the warlike feelings the sword gives you? No, they're just being corrupted by their own personal opinions and feelings.
Yeah, the
other way seems more sci-fi, doesn't it? And
yeah.
And if it is just Worf, a guy who is an outcast and really believes in this and feels strongly, and Kor, a guy who, let's face it, he's 140-something years old, and he feels like he also has been denied the glory that he that he's earned. Okay, so these guys are maybe not the right guys, but in the right person's hands, couldn't it be like an important artifact? Like, I remember Rightful Heir, that Kahless clone, he seemed pretty cool. Like, he's pretty cool about things. Yeah,
that one they went with a kind of a corrupt solution that is... morally objectionable in some ways, but like, they make you believe in their convictions to go with it,
Yeah.
Whereas they were just like, we can't trust them with the sword.
Well, no, I mean, if Gowron got his hands on it, it would be a disaster. Like, forget that.
I get that, yeah, but I felt like, I don't know, it felt like sort of a cop-out in a way, too.
Yeah, like, that's a great point that you bring up about the solution that they come up with, where Worf, because of his belief and his feeling of stewardship of the Klingon Empire, agrees to this great lie that that this is Kahless returned and not a clone. Which I think the Klingons have science and tricorders. Like, wouldn't they figure this out pretty quick? But nobody's challenged it yet. Yeah. But maybe this episode is kind of like an answer to that, in that Worf isn't willing to do that anymore. He's not willing to lie or to put things at risk, and he's like, I don't think people can handle this, so we'll just dump it.
Yeah, I mean, well, he almost, like, it's made unclear, like, whether or not he would have, like, killed for it. So I can sort of see, that being convincing enough. But I don't know, I wasn't fully sold on it, but I was sold enough to kind of mildly enjoy most of the episode. It was a fun ride.
Yeah, it's a really fun ride. The sword as an artifact of the Klingon people, and like the other things that are mentioned, like the Emperor's crown or the shroud or the Grail of Kahless, they remind me of something from the real world, the legendary 3 sacred treasures of Japan.
Oh, I don't think I know about this.
They're the imperial regalia, like what the Emperor is presented with by the priesthood when they take the throne of Japan. and they consist of the mirror, and I'm going to do my best, Yata no Kagami, the jewel Yasakani no Magatama, and the sword Kusanagi, and they represent the three primary virtues, wisdom, benevolence, and valor, respectively.
Okay. That's
and they
cool.
They were supposedly given to the people by a legendary ancestor who was part divine, like Kahless. And it's interesting. They were historical artifacts. They were lost in the 12th century when there was a civil war, and they were thrown into the sea. And the jewel and the mirror were recovered, but the sword was reportedly lost. Which reminds me a lot of the story of when Morath, Kahless' brother, slew their father and threw his sword into the ocean, and it was lost.
Yeah, and that was a great story too.
Yeah. And the treasures of Japan, they're supposedly now kept by the Japanese government, but the public hasn't seen them in centuries. They never show them to anybody. We only have conjectural images of what they even look like. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's wild.
So it's this same thing of it's really important that these things exist. I suppose you could come out tomorrow and go, yeah, we don't have any of those things. They don't, this is an empty box. Don't worry about it. It's the 21st century. Who cares? But they don't. They've kept the idea of these things around for 1,200 years or whatever it is, and because it's just so important to their beliefs and their way of life and the way they kind of see themselves. And I think that's a great metaphor. And clearly, this episode and the idea of the Sword of Kahless or even just the existence of Kahless himself, was inspired by something like that in real life.
Yeah. So it is a good follow up to that, but I don't know. I feel like I guess when I do think about what happens if you even try to tell anyone in the Klingon Empire about it, I feel like a civil war does go down.
A lot. It seems like they're always having civil war. Yeah.
So maybe this is I don't know. This is just a further indictment of Klingons a little bit.
Yeah.
These guys will fight over anything.
I'm often fascinated by the kind of parallels or connections between the way they depict Klingons and Japanese and Chinese cultures historically.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I think that's obvious when they created them, right? Their initial description of them sort of goes for that a little bit.
Yeah, just the idea of these warrior heroes, that they tell stories about, which is a very familiar of the Chinese tradition, or even the Japanese idea of Bushido and having honor, and whether people really had honor or not, because there was a lot of civil wars and internecine conflict in medieval Japan. But setting this thing up as, hey, stop fighting this thing. We got to have this honor, and whether or not people follow it, it's still sort of is. It's still placed as this thing that you should be. The good Klingon has honor. The good Klingon is not false and is heroic and not a coward.
Yeah, and I love that they almost immediately in Star Trek throw out that it's those are necessarily real, because you have Worf, who's like you said, the only one who seems sometimes striving to abide by that.
Yeah.
But then it always surprises you, other Klingons will follow these codes when they are, not bothering them too much. I don't know. I love the very human way they've handled this. It's not I don't know. I feel like in maybe a lesser sci-fi show, Klingons would be more one-dimensional, and they would have this.
They would all follow. Yeah, they'd all follow those tenets, and you could just predict their behavior.
Yeah, but it's on the flip side, they would say they have them, but they're constantly corrupt. But instead, this does kind of show how a lot of people are, where they have these beliefs and values, but sometimes in the world or the society they live in, it's they're constantly challenged. So they don't always act in up to the way they say they should.
Yeah, you even get characters who will appeal to people's sense of honor and uprightness, but themselves aren't practicing it. One of my favorite, maybe my favorite Klingon is Gowron.
Oh yeah,
specifically because of his portrayal, but specifically because he is the worst Klingon, but at the same time he's the perfect politician. You know, he's always appealing to these Klingon virtues, even at the same time making deals. And he's like, hey, what's up, Picard? Let's do this. And he's going behind people's backs. And,
right.
And even like they're doing okay in the war. And he's got this great guy, Martok, who's this general, but people really like Martok. And he's like, I got to get rid of this guy. Because what I would do if I was him would be kill me. So this guy's got to go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's got a lot of depth, I feel like, as a character, because it does feel very like, again, it doesn't feel like, oh, he's just so corrupt. He's not just like a blatant hypocrite, even though he is. Like, that's not his character. It is that he is like just like a, you know, savvy politician, I guess.
Yeah, he wants glory for the Empire, but you know, he wants to make sure he's number one too.
Yeah, it does seem like he believes in that in some ways, but yeah.
He's going to do it his way.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube video I saw that's from the intro from the video game Klingon Honor Guard.
Yes,
which came out in 1998. And we were talking earlier about these video games and all this extra material that somebody has consumed all of it, but I'll never be able to get to it all. And this video gives like a quick history of Klingon prehistory, and it tells the story of how Kahless and the Honorable Three, Ogot, Kahless, and Tokar, overthrew Molor. And the three honorable Klingons swore an oath of duty to Kahless, and they threw their daggers on the ground. And the three daggers are replicated in the symbol of the Empire, which represents the three virtues of Klingon society: strength, duty, and sacrifice. I thought that was really cool.
That is awesome. I love that someone made that for this game that is, I'm going to guess it's terrible, but not the writing, but you know, I don't have high hopes for a 90s.
I don't know, first person shooter in 98, like that was like the perfect, you know, time for first person shooters.
Yeah. Not this. I feel like not this one. I'm going to watch a Let's Play after this though and see what's up with it.
It blew me away. There's so many Klingon games, and like the extent of the production on them.
I've never heard
crazy.
of one of them. It's crazy.
Well, they were a while ago. I mean, there's one called, I think it's called Armada. I'm not sure. And they basically use all the Klingon actors from Star Trek 6. So you're Christopher Plummer. You just want to go do some more Shakespeare or something. And they're like, hold up. We got to do 2 hours of FMV sequences of you talking to David Warner or whatever. Like, all these amazing actors are doing this crappy
That's
crazy
video game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a Star Trek board game that has a video element.
Oh yeah.
With Gowron in it.
Yeah, Robert O'Reilly he did so many of these things.
Yeah, maybe
I hope he's got a really big house.
Yeah, they can get him to do. He's a little different than Christopher Plummer, I guess. But
yeah, no, he's Star Trek ride or die for life. I think he does the VO for the Honor Guard thing too.
That awesome. I would love to play a Klingon game, but I feel like these probably aren't good. So I'm hoping for that too.
I gotta check Good Old Games and see if they've got any of these.
Yes.
There are a lot of caves in this episode. Caves.
It's pretty classic.
It's classic Star Trek. In the original draft of the episode, there was even more caves. They wanted to really seal the connection to Indiana Jones and adventure films. And there was a planned, in that last part, after they get the sword and they're trying to get out, there was going to be like a running shootout with Toral's forces, with booby traps going off and like floors collapsing.
That would be sweet.
And they couldn't do any of it. Too bad for Tom Morga, because it would have taken like an extra day or two to shoot, and you know, it's TV. They just couldn't do it.
Yeah, Indiana Jones wasn't all caves though.
No, but they could have done. They would have done something that would have like reminded you of the boulder chasing him or something like that.
Has there ever been like a train scene in Star Trek?
A scene where it's like coming and somebody like jumps out of the way at the last second?
Or like people are running on top of a train or
oh.
You know, like Indiana Jones style, like, you know, that would be cool. That would be cool because you don't see a lot of trains in Star Trek because I guess transporters.
No, we just got one in Solo. We got a Star Wars train, but I just think it'd be too tough to do convincingly. I think.
I guess that's a good point.
There could be an Enterprise episode that I'm not recalling where they did something like that.
They might have trains in Enterprise. Yeah,
it would just be that like SNL sketch on top of a train, like you're doing a Hitchcock sketch or something, and it's like the blue screen just continually going by, and it probably wouldn't have looked very good.
I'll hold out hope for someday.
Worf is you are the biggest Worf fan. I'm up there. I'm top 10 probably. I really like the fact that not only did this actor want to stick around for the whole time because he's got Neutrogena T-gel money, like he doesn't need you. He stuck around, but also because he was there, the writers just noticed him eventually. You know, he does so little for the first 2 or 3 years of TNG until they finally went, oh no, we can do something with this guy. We've got this tie-in to all these fascinating Klingon politic episodes, that like guys like Ron D. Moore wrote out. And just, you talked before about it's not interesting when you've got a character who's like, I like honor, and he does honor all the time. But Worf kind of is that, but it's also interesting because when you have a character like that, then you can just throw things at that character and see how they survive it. Like, will they continue to do those honorable things when just everything's falling apart? Your brother's, something's going on with him, your spine is broken.
Right.
Like all those TNG episodes. And
it does always go, I feel like, different ways. It's not always like he believes this and then he's broken by the end and he goes this way. Like, I don't know. He always has, like, interesting twists and turns that do make him feel like that I just really connect with. Like, I feel like he's a very complex individual, where sometimes he will go this way because he thinks it's the right thing, or sometimes he might, go against that. And I like that. It's, I feel like, again, a lesser show would just be like, hey, dipshit, your honor system is not as perfect as you thought it would. And then by the end, he's like, oh, I guess I learned something today,
And also, this episode draws on a lot of previous like TNG episodes, like with Rightful Heir and Redemption. And I think that Worf was kind of a training ground where you could put a character in a situation where they might make a mistake or they might have to agree to something that they don't want. And I don't know if this is a Roddenberry thing. Like, we know that Roddenberry's adamant that like Star Trek characters or Federation characters are always good. They don't disagree with each other. Maybe because Worf was a Klingon, they were allowed to explore something that was a little less moral, and he would have to make tough choices. Because it seems like all of his choices are always, okay, we'll do this thing that will help the Empire, but I have to like accept excommunication. I want to help my brother, but we have to like wipe his memory to do it. Like, all of his successes contain a lot of failure as well.
Yeah, and I do think like a lot of his choices sometimes, like, it's obviously intended, but it does even metatextually kind of fly in the face of, I guess, the morality play that TNG usually is. Like, like even when they reprimand him, it still feels like they kind of got away with it a little bit. Like, he murders someone in an episode, and it's just like they do, say like tut tut, but then the episode kind of is, by the end of it, like, yeah, that guy, he should have gotten murdered,
Yeah, one of my favorite DS9 episodes is, and I must love it so much because I can't remember the title, it's the one where Worf and Dax have to go on this like secret mission, and Dax is mortally wounded. They're in the jungle, and it comes down to he either can take her back to the shuttle and get her help, or go ahead and complete the mission and maybe she'll be okay. And even she's saying like, go, do it. I've lived a long life. We've got to win this war. Like, I want you to leave. And he leaves, and he immediately comes back, takes her back to the shuttle, gets her help. And Sisko yells at him. Sisko's like, hey, but you got to do this mission, man. This is your job. This isn't just about you and your wife. Like, this is the future of the Federation, and you're not going to lead any more teams. Like, I can't trust you anymore, even though you did the right thing.
Yeah, that's legit. I like that they go, they unravel some of these things a little bit. I guess in the long term, Star Trek has a lot of like weird baggage now. Like, of like,
tell.
Well, I just mean as far as what does the show stand for? Like, people saying, people talk now about the newer shows like Star Trek, it's supposed to be this, utopian society where, everything's great, and it's other places that are bad, and that's clearly never been the case. But I've always liked that idea. But then again, some of my favorite episodes are the ones that go against that, and I feel like a lot of Worf storylines are, like you said, even though he's Klingon, he's part of this Starfleet. He's part of this society, and I don't know. It's complicated. I just feel like there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of dialogue in Star Trek with itself, obviously.
Speaking of people in Starfleet, apparently Starfleet officers can just say, yeah, I got an insane quest I have to go on, so I might come back, I might get killed, that just depends, so get somebody to fill in for me in the science lab.
Oh, yeah, I was highly expecting this to be more of an issue, but...
All they had to do was just ask Dad for the car, and then once they've got it, they're off.
Yeah, Cisco had a very, the cool teacher vibe in that scene, too.
Yeah. Cool teacher's shaving. Should we ask him about this?
Yeah, you can hang out here during your lunch period and watch movies if you want.
Yeah, Cisco's turning the chair around, sitting down. Yeah. Hey, I was once like you. Yeah. Yeah, I just wonder. We were talking about how the way that Federation citizens and Starfleet officers have to act, and Dax as the Klingon weeb in this situation. Of course, Curzon was, I'm so into Klingon culture, and so has passed that to Jadzia. I like how it's like, okay, she can kill people, like, when she's with Klingons. That's fine. Like, normally she has to, behave herself and, go by the code of honor of Starfleet. But if she's on a blood oath, then she can do 20 things that Picard would be yelling at her for.
Well, yeah, and that episode, Blood Oath, kicked open the door. It's like everyone now has to just deal with the fact that she does that.
Yeah.
Everyone will look at you all angry, but then next episode you're hanging out on the holosuites or something,
There must be a lot of things like that in Federation culture where you just kind of go, oh, that's how they do things. And we have that now. People from certain parts of the Middle East eat with their hands. And for an American, that'd be like, can I get a fork? I don't want to eat with my hands. But it's just cultural differences. But the weird thing about the Federation is that presumably, sure, there's a lot of different aliens in the Federation, but they all presumably have a similar set of values that come out of just the way society is or the Federation charter or whatever. But then right over here, you've got Klingons who you're trying to be friends with, you're trying to be good neighbors with, but they're eating hearts and they're killing people they're having arguments with. And you have to just kind of go, okay, all right, that's right. The way they do it. That's how it is in their family. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always is this hard barrier between Federation and Klingon culture. You see other ones, I guess maybe because Klingons never become part of the Federation, whereas you see other ones, other cultures kind of have their differences, but they kind of get more, everyone kind of assimilates,
Yeah. That's something else. I don't mean to just crap on Picard all day, but it's something else that kind of bothers me about Picard, which is, we're going to dig into the Romulans, which is good, I think, because they've just been, like you said before, they kind of pop up in these little episodes every now and then. But we're really digging into their society, and it's everything is secrets. You have a fake door, in your house that's not your real door, and nobody knows your real name. And I never thought that the Romulans were. I just thought they were skilled at international diplomacy and espionage. I never thought that the secrets were baked into their culture so much.
Yeah, well,
there are 8 secret letters in the alphabet that only certain people know.
When they said, when they said that secret police is a redundant or whatever. It felt,
right.
It felt like they were almost turning to the camera and being like, "This is here's a retcon that we've done for you,"
Yeah.
Because but I guess they were just kind of what's a more unique angle we can go at from the Romulans other than militaristic bad guys.
Yeah, and they've got secrets is what they landed on, I guess. And spitting acid?
I'm okay with it just because I don't know. I didn't have anything in my mind of what the Romulans should be like, except for maybe how they are in Balance of Terror, because they look cool.
Yeah,
they're all
really
like Roman, and maybe they should have leaned hard into that,
which has been totally dropped. I guess we haven't gone anywhere Romulan proper yet, but Picard's two friends who work on his vineyard just dress like people that will work in a vineyard.
They're like Scottish too, right?
So or something like that. Yeah, but we haven't seen like anybody in robes yet, or like we haven't seen the Roman thing really be pushed. So maybe they've dropped that.
They grew out of that.
Once your planet or your sun blows up, you forget about the Roman crap.
People in Italy now aren't walking around with robes on.
Yeah, but they did it for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, they loved robes.
Bring the helmets back. Bring the dumb helmets back. What'd you think of their solution at the end? Apparently, Kor can't be trusted with it. Worf can't be trusted with it. And if we can't be trusted, nobody can. So just dump it.
It felt sometimes like some Star Trek episodes do, where it just felt like they cut to the chase a little bit and was like, here's the end. Like, I wasn't necessarily sold on that was the best solution. Not that they presented an obvious alternative, but it was just kind of like, I don't know. It was more stylish than it was like, emotionally resonant. It just looked cool seeing the sword float around in space.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody's gonna get a bat'leth in the hull someday if conditions are right, flying through space. I guess I don't know. I guess that's the right thing to do, especially if you're following the Indiana Jones plan, right? This is the hide the Ark in the warehouse, or let the cup just drop into an abyss because it's no one man should have it.
Mm-hmm. I didn't believe that by the end of it they weren't incapable of at least overcoming it enough to not to use it or anything, but to like be like, okay, well we can't give it to Gowron or Kahless or whatever, we can't give it to them, but like it is an important thing to our history. Maybe we should like hold on to it somewhere.
Toss it. Yeah, give it to Quark or something like that. Have him put it in his vault or something like that.
Let Cisco. I feel like Cisco could hold on to it.
Sure. Yeah, he could be trusted with it.
Don't tell anybody.
Right. If it only tempts Klingons. Yeah. It's a weird, like, short-sighted thing, I think, for people like Ira Stephen Bear who, let's face it, I don't want to be talked down to, but if your intention was that it's just the strivings of their heart and the temptation of, being accepted into Klingon society that makes them act this way, I still feel like there was rays coming out of it. It's just they act so strange and act so weird and extreme that, okay.
Yeah, it didn't. That's why I felt like I had like considered that element like when it was too late, because it felt so sudden.
Yeah. Plus, wouldn't it be cool? Wasn't my idea cool? Like, what if the entire Klingon society was based on a lie, just rays from a sword that was made from a meteorite or something like that?
I feel like this episode, there's not enough time to get into that.
There is enough time to talk about how I love that Dax just stuns the two of them when they're just messing around, and she's like, all right, screw this, just blast them. Yeah. This is how all violent conflicts should be resolved in the 24th century. Anytime anybody goes after somebody at a ball game or whatever, stun. It doesn't leave any lasting damage. It immediately incapacitates them. It's like pepper spray, but you don't need like milk to wash your eyes out.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's, I don't know, I guess you got to trust who you're giving the stunner to.
Right, and of course we've got the fact that everybody in the Federation is, she waited a long time. Like, she's using those Federation ideals. But if she gets cranky because she can't get any sleep, then blast
but
away.
Dax is trusty with it for sure.
Anything else that you can think of that you wanted to say about this episode?
I liked the stunt guy alien you were talking about. Just a random ass alien there, but it was cool.
Mind reading vampire. Yeah.
Yeah, I like when the fight breaks out and you're just like, oh yeah, he's just like this weird guy they got on their team. But yeah, other than that, it was, like I said, some of the things felt like I don't know. I feel like you could have held on to it, would have made it for a good plot element later on. But overall, it's still pretty fun, and it doesn't disregard or like offend me, for not doing anything right. It's just there. It's a good time. It's like hanging out with your bud.
Yeah, it's cool to have Kor come back, and we see a little more of him. And I also like the idea, it sets up his end in, whatever that episode is. I'm not doing good on episode titles today, but when he sacrifices himself to save everybody, we get that. We know that he loves telling his stories, and he loves the idea of glory and honor like any Klingon, but we get that he's getting up there, and he's looking for a good exclamation point on this sentence. Yeah.
I like that his character, it goes from just being, just some, bad guy of the week essentially, and TOS to, they give him a pretty good arc for considering what his character is.
Yeah, and he doesn't want it to be, and Kor came along to be his epitaph.
Yeah. No, I like it.
Well, let's talk My Space Dad Can Beat Up Your Space Dad. The last time you were on the show with Mary, you talked about, I think you said Cisco was your favorite captain?
I think so, yeah. That's what I said at the time.
Has it changed since then?
I think maybe just because I did a rewatch of TNG, or like some of the important episodes, I've like wavered back towards Picard a little bit more.
Sure.
And I don't know. It's hard to pick. I feel like for me the trifecta of the first three captains is pretty solid. They all have their own unique traits. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm back on the Picard train.
In watching TNG recently, has your opinion of it increased?
Of TNG?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what really happened was getting more into the Worf character. I used to be. I remember, like, the first time I went through it, I still love all the characters, but it was like I was all about Data, and my favorite episodes were Data episodes, and I don't know. I think going back to it after getting into like Deep Space Nine and seeing some of the more complicated plots, Worf is the person who's really having those, I think, on TNG, and I don't know. That has been the big change for me, was going through it, was like, I loved the Worf episodes, and if it's like, what's going on in this one? Oh, it's like Riker's on trial for something. I'm like, okay, I don't care. No shade to Riker, but that's been the big change for me. It's getting into Worf.
I think Riker's kind of boring. Like, I think that Jonathan Frakes is so charismatic and so game. And when you hear stories by him, or you read like behind the scenes stuff, you realize like how into this he was. Cause he's a good looking guy. He's tall. He could have been on any TV show, or just kind of bided his time on this weird sci-fi show. But like, he really got into it. So thanks to all that stuff, I wish they'd given him like better stories. And I think that the problem is that if he's just mini Picard, there's not as much you can do.
Yeah, I started to appreciate his specific role. I think I mentioned this on another podcast, how like even when he was directing stuff, he never forced himself into like a bigger role. It was more like Picard got to go on the movie adventure in some of the movies, and Riker gets to like be captain basically. And he has just like kind of your more military thriller, whatever, action storyline. And I was like, you know what, that's a good lane for him. You know? I almost prefer that to episodes where he's like, making fake holodeck ladies, or something like that.
I don't need your holographic women. I like that sometimes, on Voyager, you'll see Robert Duncan McNeil pop up. And he's a fine director, but it always seems like Tom Paris is like always hanging around in the episodes that his actor directs. So,
sure.
It's nice that Jonathan Frakes is like, no, it's about the show.
Yeah, he might be my favorite Trek actor director.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Sure. Now that we've reached the end of the show, you'll receive a promotion to the rank of full lieutenant. And let's see, you were working as a barback. Then you were commissioned as an ambassador. And we talked about Enterprise the last time that you were on the show.
Yeah.
Have you watched any Enterprise recently?
Other than for backtracking, I have not. But I want to. I'm
recreational Enterprise.
I got one back on board with their little Borg adventure. So
people always wow me with, you see social media posts and people are like, starting another rewatch, DS9, here we go. It's like, how do you do that? It takes me years to get through an entire series.
Yeah, I've watched Deep Space Nine once, and then,
right.
I revisit the episodes that I'm like, oh yeah, that was cool.
But
it's on TV.
Enterprise is only 4 seasons, so if you were going to rewatch a series, like that would be a good one to do.
That's obvious. And
I could get that done in 6 months.
It's a prequel, so it's you start chronologically.
Yeah, it's not too tough. A lot of people rubbing oil on each other and having a good time. Or it's disinfectant gel or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Classic scene.
Yeah. Classic sci-fi. Lieutenant Fame, thanks for joining me again to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can at EISTPOD on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at GooeyFame, and I've got some podcasts that are linked there in my bio, so go check all of them out.
What's coming up on any one of those podcasts?
Well, we just had a backtracking come out where we talked about Darmok, and that's the most Star Trek episode of Star Trek. You're not going to want to miss that.
It is. I mean, you just have to concede that. I think, like when you think of Star Trek, people think of Darmok.
Yeah, 2 guys. It's like pro wrestling. 2 guys. One leaves,
Right. They enter the squared canyon.
Exactly.
Well, thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. This was a lot of fun.
We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.
Your Honor, a courtroom is a crucible. In it we burn away irrelevancies until we are left with a pure product, the truth, for all time.
Oh man, this is so intense. Data's on trial for his life.
I know. This episode, The Measure of a Man, is based on the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision of 1857.
And every week on Backtracking, we take a look at the real-world events that inspired classic Star Trek episodes. Sorry.
Shut up!
Shh. Who are you?
We're the hosts of Backtracking. I'm Caliban.
You will both be taken to the brig and from there to the nearest starbase, where you will answer charges for what you have done.
And I'm GooeyFame.
This is not a game. This is life and death.
You can follow us on Twitter.
Backtracking is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
You go f*** yourself.